everyone. Lesson 18 of Write That Novel Now with your supercritical mentor, Jim Parsons. You haven't suffered one of my critiques. It's time you did. Blood all over the page. Okay, what are we going to do today? Two things. First, I'd like to wrap up my discussion of Show Don't Tell. I could talk Show Don't Tell for the entire year, but I'm certain you're glad that I'm not going to. We've had a few lessons on Show Don't Tell, and then I jumped back to talking about structure. So now I'd like to come back and finalise Show Don't Tell. And then, second half of the lesson, I'm going to start on the new topic, dialogue, which will occupy several lessons. According to the rule of thumb, dialogue should occupy about a third of your novel. So it's mighty important that you know how to write good dialogue. And that's what I'm going to teach you in the next few lessons. But first, let's get straight into that discussion of Show Don't Tell. Okay, over the last couple of weeks, I've shown you the predominant forms of telling when you should be showing. But I did mention early on that there are a couple of subtle ways that might escape you. So just to round off my sessions on Show Don't Tell, I'd like to look at 6 types of telling when you should be showing. And you might notice the changes I've made on the screen. One of my clients and regular viewers, Pat, said that she can't read the white print on a blue background. So Pat, just for you, here we are, black on whatever you'd like to call it, gold. 6 types of telling when you should be showing. First type, and that is failing to use POV, the person's point of view in a key scene. Here's an example of how it shouldn't be done. As the knife-wielding thug backed Teresa into the shop doorway, she suddenly realised she had no escape route. She wondered if there was a way to distract him. Remembering an old self-defense video she'd seen, she started yelling aggressive karate sounds and hurled her stiletto-heeled shoe at his head. Okay, you can see that this is telling the reader what happened rather than getting inside Teresa's head and revealing how she's feeling at the time. We get phrases like, she suddenly realised, she wondered. These are very clearly telling phrases. Second way we have looked at before as well, and that is when you're listing physical attributes that could just be blended into the narrative. Charlie was a short, chubby man with a beer belly and a shiny bald head. It'd be much better if there was some way that you could demonstrate that he was a little bit overweight, maybe puffing, climbing the stairs. Maybe the streetlights reflect on his bald head or something like that. There have to be ways around this straight-out telling. Number 3 is when you state your character's emotions. Now, this is your central character. We don't have to get into the heads of other characters. But your central character's emotions are important to reveal the character to the reader and perhaps to make them empathise with them. So don't do stuff like this. Sam was broken-hearted at the death of his father. You've just told the reader. Show Sam is broken-hearted. Let's see him kneeling beside the body of the dog, maybe putting his head down on it. Let's see Sam sobbing his heart out. Number 4, this is a variation of the last one. Not quite as bad, but you need to avoid it. Because what we're talking about here is redundancy, saying things that are unnecessary. So this is stating before showing. Marcia was furious. He stormed into the room, seized Michael by the tie, and shouted into his face, "Who the hell do you think you are?" We don't need to tell the reader Marcia was furious. Her actions, her words should be ample to let your reader know, because you're showing that she's furious. Just start with she stormed into the room, etc., etc., and let your reader make the statement in their head, oh, Marcia is furious. Don't tell them and then demonstrate it. Waste of time. We're moving on now to dialogue. And Again, it's a redundancy. Redundant adverbs in dialogue tag. The dialogue tag is that thing like he said or she said. And an adverb, for those that are not sure about this, an adverb is the word that goes after the doing word, after the verb, to say how it was done. She walked swiftly. He died quietly, right? Those ly words are adverbs. And the less you use them, the better. And in this case, very much so the better. Let's have a look what happens when we add them to a dialogue tag. What must I do? He stammered hesitantly. Oh, goodness me. If you can't tell from that line of dialogue that the person is stammering, and indeed hesitantly, there's something wrong. Rely on your skills in constructing good dialogue. You probably don't even have to say he stammered, right? That's redundant. You've got it there, right there in front of the reader. Now, next one. My treasure, my dearest, my very love, Sir Roderick said lovingly. Okay, bit of a send up here. But again, if your reader doesn't twig that treasure, dearest, and love are words that are said lovingly, there's something wrong. The only time in a situation like this that you would need an adverb is if the words are not to be taken at face value. If Sir Roderick is being facetious and he doesn't mean it at all, and says, oh, my treasure, my dearest, my very love, Sir Roderick said facetiously, then it might be appropriate. There's even a way around that. You might be able to say, my treasure, my dearest, my very love, Sir Roderick said, turned to Michael and rolled his eyes. There are ways to show that the person isn't being serious. So that one is redundant adverbs in dialogue tag. It's telling. Last one is the info dump. I love this word. There's lots of ways you can do info dumps. It's, large sections of your writing where all you're doing is telling your reader information to catch them up on stuff. It's particularly bad in dialogue. Dialogue is supposed to reveal character. Dialogue is supposed to advance the plot. It shouldn't be used as a way to get information across to your reader. Have a look at this one. This is Uncle Bill, let's say. Uncle Bill is talking. Well, Morris, I guess you're going to have to phone your mother, my sister Tilly, who lives in Australia, and tell her you refuse to work for the family firm, Clothiers and Sons, that she set up in 1959. Now, this is an outrageous example. I'm sure you wouldn't do anything this awful, but believe me, I find minor examples of this in many people's work. So what's gone wrong here? Surely Morris doesn't need to be told that Morris's mother is Uncle Bill's sister? I would guess Morris, unless he's been in a cave for 30 years, my guess is that Morris does know his mother lives in Australia. He would know the name of the family firm that he's refused to work in, and he might probably know that his mother set that firm up in 1959. So the only reason this piece of dialogue is here is to tell the reader something that you'd like them to know. It's an info dump. Say it, info dump. Don't do it. All right. And now, because we've been talking about dialogue, let's move on and introduce that as our next. Yes, dialogue. As I said at the start of this lesson, it occupies roughly a third of your novel, so it had better be good. The beauty of dialogue is that apart from those two instances that I showed you of awful telling within dialogue, if you use dialogue, you can be sure you're showing. So it is a safe way of knowing that you're showing, not telling. Use dialogue. What is that? We all like to earwig on conversation, don't we? Come on, don't deny it. And so it's a surefire hook. If you start chapter 1 with dialogue, you've probably hooked your reader already. Dialogue ticks a lot of boxes. I'll probably be doing 2 or 3, maybe 4 lessons on dialogue. Next lesson, I think we'll talk about correct punctuation of dialogue, because that's important. I want to devote a lesson to dialogue tags. I want to devote a lesson to talking head syndrome and how to avoid it. If you don't know what talking head syndrome is, listen in. But for the moment, I just want to use a PowerPoint display to introduce dialogue and have a look at the 3 types of dialogue tags that you should be using. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to start this discussion of dialogue by talking about the 3 dialogue tag styles that are available to you. I'm going to try to avoid talking about punctuation and all the other aspects of dialogue, because they're coming later in other lessons. So let's just look at these 3. First one is your basic garden variety dialogue tag. This is the one you're really used to. It's the he said, she said, Bill said. And here's just a couple of examples. Basic garden variety tag's a dumb expression, Bill said. Okay, that's where you pop that tag on the end. The tag, as you're well aware, can also go on the front. Bill said, basic garden variety tag is a dumb expression. Just extending this a little further, another one where it's on the front. Mary replied, be so good. Or it could be with the end, should you be so critical? Mary asked. So the most common ones you're going to see are said, when it's a statement, and asked, when it's a question, or it may be if someone replies to something that said, it can be replied. Never say, should you be so critical? Mary questioned. I do see this quite a lot in novice writers' work. Questioned is not a dialogue tag. Questioning is an action. A dialogue tag really has to relate to something being said, the way something is being said, replied, asked. You ask a question, you don't question. Number 2 is what you call an action tag. Nothing to do with dialogue. It's not saying the person said anything, but an action tag goes before the dialogue, the piece of dialogue. And it's an action that makes it very clear. It mentions the character's name, or else uses the pronoun he or she. It uses the character's name and makes it quite clear that the very next piece of dialogue is going to come from this person. Here's an example. Paul jabbed his finger into Mike's chest. Just keep your nose out of my business, all right? So there's no sense that this is a connection with the speech itself. It's an action. And it ends with a full stop. Just keep your nose out of my business, all right? Another one. Joan spotted a tray of sandwiches. I hope they included a gluten-free option. So no one else but Joan could have been saying that. And the last one is not exactly an action tag, but I thought I'd include it with this batch. It's if you're in a strong POV, it could be first person, it could equally be a strong POV in third person. Let's pretend it's third person. I'll add something ahead of this to make it clear that it is. George wiped the sweat from his brow. There was nothing else for it. It was surrender or die. Okay, I'm coming out with my hands up. Hold your fire. So in other words, this line of thought, this is going on in George's head, makes it very clear that when we see, okay, I'm coming out with my hands up, we know it can only be George speaking. And so now the third type is no tag at all. And I'm sure you're familiar with this one. To set it up, you really have to identify the two people that are going to be participating in the no tag match. And so we say Sam was stretched out on the sofa. So there's our first person. Hey, are you going to Sarah's party? Bill asked. So we get the tag there. So we know we've got Sam and we've got Bill. Hey, are you going to Sarah's party? Bill asked. Nah. Oh, any reason? Can't stand her. Guess that's as good a reason as any. So once we've established who the two speakers are, we can drop back to no tag at all. And the reader understands that they are taking turns to say something. So the two speakers are alternating and it's very clear who they are. Now, of course, in a real piece of dialogue that goes on for a little while like this, it can get confusing and then you need to throw in a tag. And if it's three people, it's almost impossible unless one of them has a very distinctive voice or an accent or something to make quite clear who that third person is when they speak. I would not advise it. Now, okay, we've got these three things at our disposal, and it's quite important that you don't overuse one of them, because then it becomes monotonous. You develop patterning, and any sort of patterning leaps out at the reader. You might notice it, but the reader will. So let's have a look at this no tag at all when we extend it. Hey, are you going to Sarah's party? Bill asked. Nah. Oh, any reason? Can't stand her. Guess that's as good a reason as any. Plus, she told Ali I was too timing her and she dumped me. But you were, weren't you? Yeah, but you didn't have to tell her. There'll be lots of nice girls there. Hint, hint. I've given them up for Lent. Oh, come on, man. You'll enjoy it once you get there. You don't take no for an answer, do you? You're my best buddy. Can't go to a party without you. All right, so you can see that while it's quite clear what's going on and who's speaking, it's monotonous. There's a pattern there that isn't being broken. And I'll drop a little hint here. This is a prime example of talking head syndrome. When your dialogue writing starts to sound like a radio play, it's not good. It's talking head syndrome. Let's have a look at monotony too. This is where we use the tag. And this is one that many novice writers do. They think you have to keep using it. Hey, are you going to Sarah's party? Bill asked. Nah, Sam replies. Oh, any reason? Bill asked. Can't stand her, Sam said. Guess that's as good a reason as any, Bill said. Plus, she told Ali I was too timing her and she dumped me, Sam complained. Oh, there's a different word. But you were, weren't you? Bill asked. Yeah, but she didn't have to tell us, Sam said. So when you get this tag on the end repeatedly, it becomes monotonous. The pattern is glaring. Even when, as I demonstrated there, you throw in a different word, like complained, it still has the same effect. And similarly, if we use the action tag too much, look what happens. Bill slapped Sam on the back. Hey, are you going to Sarah's party? Sam shook his head. Nah. Bill frowned. Oh, any reason? Sam shrugged. Can't stand her. Bill cracked his knuckles and nodded slowly. Guess that's as good a reason as any. Sam echoed the slow nod. Plus, she told Ali I was too timing her and she dumped me. Bill grinned broadly. But you were, weren't you? Sam folded his arms. Yeah, but she didn't have to tell her. Now, I don't think I've ever seen a dialogue like that. I mean, I'm being ridiculous here, but I need to do this to make it very clear to you that this is what you avoid. In the meantime, I hope you're really getting to understand what action tags are, what no tag at all means, and of course, your standard garden variety dialogue tag. Obviously, you need to mix and match to avoid that monotony. So let's just see if we can do that. Bill slapped Sam on the back. Hey, are you going to Sarah's party? Nah. Bill frowned. Oh, any reason? Can't stand her, Sam replied curtly. Guess that's as good a reason as any. Plus, she told Ali I was two-timing her and she dumped me. Grinning broadly, Bill said, "But you were, weren't you?" "Yeah, but she didn't have to tell her." "There'll be lots of nice girls there," hint, hint, Bill said. Okay, so now we've got a good mix of the three types. This is still not good dialogue. I have stripped out all the things that make good dialogue. Additions like setting detail being mixed in, atmospherics, noises in the background, and sensual detail. We've got no expressions or movement from the characters. And worst of all, we don't get anyone's POV. We don't know how one of these people is responding to what's going on. So please don't think I'm presenting this as the perfect piece of dialogue. It is dialogue stripped down to show you the three types of tags or non-tags that you can use. Well, it's almost time to go, but I'd better give you your homework for the week. Here's what I'd like you to do. On your laptop, take a chapter that you've written. Copy it so that you've got one you can throw away, destroy. Okay, that's what you need. Take the copy of that chapter and first of all, write down the total word count of that chapter. For argument's sake, let's say it is a 3,000 word chapter. Now, I'd like you to go through it and delete everything except dialogue. Get rid of all the narrative and just leave dialogue. You might end up with a couple of pages of dialogue. Now have a look at the word count again. If your book is obeying that rule of thumb, if it was originally a 3,000 word chapter, you should have about 1,000 words of dialogue. If you've got significantly more, it means probably that you're neglecting to have much action or narrative description. You're relying too much on dialogue, and that can be boring. If you've got significantly less than a third of your text as dialogue, you're underutilizing a valuable resource. Remember, dialogue is the best way to show, and it's a great hook to the reader. You can really expose your characters through dialogue. So have a look if you're not using enough dialogue. It's a great test of your writing. It's something you can do. You don't need me as mentor to go through it and say, "Oh, look, you don't do this." You can see it for yourself. Now, if you want to extend this exercise and make it a little more time consuming, take this page of dialogue and go through it with two highlighting colors. First, I want you to go through and identify all the dialogue that has absolutely no tag, as I've talked about in that last. Highlight it yellow, all the no tags. Go back again to the start and choosing a different highlight color, identify the dialogue that starts with an action tag. When you're finished, have a look at what you've got. Is one missing altogether, perhaps, or very underrepresented? These are important clues to you about your writing. If you're not doing one of them or you're underutilizing it, you're not getting that nice mix that you could have in your dialogue. And of course, you can remedy that. Okay, great little exercise. I'd love to hear the results. If you care to send me the results, I'd love to see it. Okay. So it really is time to say goodbye. So until next week, lesson 19, when I'll be showing you how to punctuate your dialogue properly. Goodbye from me and keep safe. COVID's on the rise again in Australia, and I don't know how you're faring overseas, but in America it sounds pretty grim anyway. So goodbye, kids.